Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Balance Fit and Free podcast. I'm Ray Ann Mullins, your host, and I'm so excited that you're here. And I'm back today with another personal story. So it's been really interesting over this particular season of the podcast. I've had a lot of things happening personally that are like giving me content to tell you guys. So I wanted to let you know that last week, I was teaching a yoga class to my online strength training group. So, by the way, if you're not in that, why not? Come join us. It's so fun. We meet Monday, Wednesday, Fridays for a strength workout. And then every other Friday, we do a yoga core kind of thing. And so last Friday, it was our yoga day. And I love it. I love it. Like we just do like a little yoga flow. We do, some down dogs, some planks. Like it's all, it's fine. It's nothing terrible. But I was showing them what's called a boat pose. And I had just said the words, if this hurts your back, do not do it. I literally said those words. And like 2 seconds later, I felt this like shift and searing pain in my low back. And I mean, literally, it could have been more perfect. I was like, are you kidding me? I was so mad because I know that sometimes that hurts my back to do that. And so I was just demoing really, really quick to show them what not to do, which is so ridiculous. Anyway, I've done that move probably 8 million times over the many years I've been teaching exercise. And for some reason that day, it was just not going my way. So I felt this horrible pain in my back. And I kind of finished the session because I thought, well, maybe it's not that bad. You know, when you get like a filling, maybe in your knee or your back or your hip or whatever, and you're like, keep going because maybe it's just one of those moments. Well, I kept going, and by the end, I realized, uh-oh, this is like the real deal. Like I haven't felt like that in probably 20 some years. When I was, I mean, maybe longer, can't remember. I was about 24 years old, and I did this same thing to my back. And I gotta tell you, I wasn't as good of shape as I am now at 24 as I am at 49. So that's something, right? But at the time, that's when I actually met my chiropractor, Dr. Bob. And Dr. Bob has been my chiropractor since then, which has been 20, almost 5 years. And I can honestly say through those 25 years, I've had some ups and downs with my back, but not like this. And so I knew immediately that this was something kind of big. So I want to tell you what happened in my brain. Okay. I want to tell you this because I think this is where we all go. And I'm going to give it to you from Ray Ann's standpoint. Okay. So I feel the pain. I finish the session. I go downstairs and immediately burst into tears because here's what happened in my head. My first thought is literally there was a little part of me. So, okay, before I tell you what I was saying, you know how when you're talking to yourself, you have all these different opinions and thoughts and different voices almost, like all these little pieces of you and their opinions and their thoughts and all the information you've learned over the years. You have all of this like rush of information coming in. And so our brain is like popping off, especially in a moment where you're upset. And I was very upset and physical pain. So I'm crying. And in my head, I'm saying things like, oh my gosh, I can't exercise. I can't exercise. Oh my gosh, I've been doing so well. I've been so consistent and feeling so good. And now I'm not going to be able to lift weights. And oh my gosh, I'm going to have to reduce my weights again and I'm going to lose all my progress. And oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to exercise and I'm going to gain weight. Oh my gosh, I'm going to get fat. Like I'm having all this in my head, right? That was one voice. One voice is like instant panic, like literal panic mode. And then another part pops in is like, calm down. Like, come on. You know better than this. You know that you need rest. You're not like never gonna exercise again. You aren't, eating poorly. It's gonna be totally fine. It's not a big deal. People get injured all the time. That was like my calm voice, right? And then all of a sudden another voice jumps in, is like, oh my gosh. Yep. Perimenopause. Then you're over. It's done. You're gonna get fat. You're gonna get fat. Your back's never get better. Like this is the beginning of the end. Yeah. And then another part of me is like, oh, stop it. Stop it right now. You're totally good. It's going to be fine. We're just going to cut calories really low. Like, you're not going to be able to exercise and you won't need very many calories. So you'll just like way cut back on your food. Like, we'll just go extremely low calorie, drink lots of water. It's going to be totally fine. And then another part jumps in and is like, no, you idiot. Like, cutting calories is not the only thing that matters. Like, you know better. You know, when you're injured, you need calories and you need nutrition to like heal your body. So all of this is happening. This has probably happened within, 2 minutes or less. I have this entire flood of emotions and thoughts and feelings and complete distress, right? And my poor husband, he was talking to me actually. And I'm laughing because you know how many times I've been like, "You're not listening to me, to Brian." And he's like, "Yeah, I was." And I'm like, "No, you weren't." Well, this is one of those times where I was not listening to him. He's like talking me down. And in my head, I'm having this whole like conversation, this internal dialogue just like exploding in my head. And I actually, not only was I feeling physically in pain, like I couldn't stand all the way straight up, I couldn't sit down, I was just like in this terrible position. Not only was I physically in pain, but all of this mental and emotional distress was just like exploding. And so the combination was really bad. And I ignored everything Brian had to say, although he was being very calm and trying to be helpful. I didn't hear him suggest the ice. I didn't hear him say a lot of very probably helpful things because I was already in my head and gone and in disaster mode. All right. So, you know, I tell you all of this. Well, a couple of reasons. Number one, I'm telling you this because I think we're all like this, right? As humans, we panic, you know? We all have these internal conversations and internal battles happening. And these internal dialogues lead us to what we call survival mode, you know? Survival mode, well, I'm sure you've heard of like fight or flight. Well, when you're in flight or fight, right? When you feel in danger, you just want to like flight, like flee, run, get away, like hide, avoid, get away from the situation. Or you might want to fight, like fight your way through. And so the funny thing is, in that moment, it was like I was doing both. And so when you're doing both, fight, flight, there's also two other F's in the survival mode, and there's freeze and fawn. So for me, my kind of go-to is freezing. So if you ever are kind of in that limbo of like part of you is like wants to run and the other part wants to fight and like, you know, work your way through it, sometimes that's confusing. And so all of this dialogue in my head, and when we get in these moments, can lead to either freezing or fawning. And my go-to, like I said, is freezing. I am such a freezer. When I get upset, distressed, unsure, just not clear about what's happening, I immediately shut down. Like I just completely shut down and I do nothing. Okay. So the second reason I like wanted to tell you about the conversation in my head is because I think that people that aren't, fitness trainers, nutrition coaches, wellness coaches, I think they have this idea in their mind that trainers and nutrition coaches, whatever, just have it all figured out and that we just have no problem with it. And it's just not true. Yes, I do know a lot about nutrition and I do know a lot about fitness and I do know a lot about like injuries and muscles and anatomy. I understand it. I love it. I've studied it. But, you know, sometimes I get scared. Like I get scared that I won't be able to keep it up, like, and here I am, 20, almost, 30 years, 30 years ago, I became a fitness instructor. And 20 years ago, I lost 65 pounds. So here I am, 20 years later, still have most of the weight off, 5-ish pounds here or there has come and gone. But mostly I've been able to keep it off. Mostly I've stayed in shape all these years. Mostly I've been injury free. But Yet there's still that part of me that is afraid that, all of a sudden it's going to go away, or like all of a sudden I'm going to gain the weight back, all of a sudden. And so I think I just want you to know, if you're not a trainer or you're not a nutrition coach or you're not, sure, I just want you to know that I just don't think anybody has it figured out. I don't think that anybody's perfect. I don't think anybody, no matter what their situation, is 100% confident 100% of the time. Okay, so I just wanted to share that with you. So I want to say to you that fortunately, with this whole back thing happening, I have, like I told you, I went into this like total freak out. I mean, I was freaking out. Now, physically, to Brian, I was in freeze mode. I was quiet. I was in my head. I wasn't saying anything. I was mad. I kind of wanted to cry. But in my head, it was like really noisy, like super, super, super noisy. And so the good news is, over the last few years, I've been really working on internal wellness. And as you know, because I keep talking about it, and we're talking this whole season about it. And the reason I actually started truly working on inner wellness is because, just to be totally honest with you, I started noticing that I was having disordered eating. And when I say disordered eating, I mean, I really like was starting to be so worried about what I was eating. And part of that is because when I found out I had Hashimoto's, I got the food intolerance test done and it came back with all kinds of food saying I couldn't eat it. So gluten, dairy, eggs, nuts, you know, bell peppers, chicken, there was all these things came back. And I was so worried about, like, I didn't want to be a hypocrite. I wanted to truly practice what I preached, and I wanted to truly be following what I thought at the time or was told by doctors or by the information I learned. I wanted to truly follow it right so that I could be a role model and, do a good job. But because of that, because of the stress I was putting on myself over making sure I didn't gain weight, making sure I practiced what I preach about eating protein and balancing your blood sugar and following my program, and at the same time, making sure that I was, you know, making sure I was like not eating the things I wasn't supposed to and being a hypocrite, all of this like stress, I just felt constant stress. And by the way, the more stressed you are when you have something like an autoimmune disorder like Hashimoto's or any of them, or really just for anybody's health, it is bad for you to have so much stress. So I kind of had an aha moment. When you have those, when you're like, all of a sudden it hits you like, oh my gosh, what am I doing to myself? So I had that a couple of years ago. And I was like, not, I don't have an eating disorder. Like I wasn't bulimic or anorexic or any of that, but I had disordered eating in that all I could think about was what am I going to eat? How much am I going to eat? Will it impact me all freaking day long? All day long. And it's still there. It's not as bad as it used to be, but it absolutely is an issue. So that was my number one reason into like looking into internal wellness because I was like, I can't live the rest of my life like this. I don't want to be 80 years old worrying about if I'm eating the right thing all the time. Like I want to live. In fact, I had a therapist ask me, so I went to therapy. That's what it started with. And I said, I kind of feel like I'm, worrying too much about food all the time. And I explained everything I just told you. And she said, so you're telling me you can't just sit on the couch and eat a bowl of popcorn and not think about it? And I was like, are you kidding me? I would make sure that first I had a protein, or I would make sure that it was balanced, or I'd make sure like there was always like boxes to check around every time I ate. And sometimes I would just do it because I wanted to go with the flow and not be annoying. But the entire time I was doing said, eating practice, I would be in my head, very similar to the back pain ish like dialogue. So anyway, not only was I kind of disordered in my eating because of the things I just explained, but also with exercise. I love exercise. I actually really love to exercise. It makes me feel really good physically, mentally, spiritually. I like to sweat. I like to, make my lungs burn. I like to make my muscles burn. But I also started to realize that maybe there was some disorder around that as well. Because my go-to, and it's getting better, my go-to when upset wasn't only cookies, right? So one of my go-tos when I don't feel good is I want to eat cookies because it's comforting, it's cozy, and it makes me feel safe. But the other go-to is exercise. And I know they're on both extremes, right? One is like eating high calorie, high fat, high sugar food to give me that kind of quick comfort. But the other one, which is a little bit more of a control, was when I wasn't feeling great, I was starting to use exercise to avoid my feelings. And as soon as I realized that, I was like, wow, like here I am being a fitness, wellness, nutrition coach, helping people feel their best. And I mean it. Like, I mean it. I want so badly for people to feel good physically, mentally, spiritually. Yet I was tearing myself down because of trying to keep up an image. And so, wow, I don't know. I'm totally off track here. I didn't mean to get off track here, but my point is that's when I started doing the inner wellness work. And I'm so glad I took a bunch of classes. Like I said, I started therapy. I started reading different books. I've always been into kind of self-help mindset books, but I kind of went a different path. And I've already told you the story if you've been listening to the podcast, but that's when I went down the breathwork road. I was like, wow, this is really something. And it spoke so much to me. So, through all of this inner healing practice on myself, because I think you have to do it yourself before you can teach it, through all of that and through the studies and through my certifications and the new, information I've learned, I found that not just that I've learned that we all do this. We all have this internal dialogue. We all have these parts in our system that appear when we don't feel good or when we're scared or when we're in danger or when we're in perceived danger. And it's very, very common that we do this to ourselves. And so um, I think, though, then I want to kind of segue into the next part is that we all do this. I mean, think about it just for a second right now. Think about how many times you have a conversation in your head with yourself and how many times you criticize yourself. How many times do you call yourself stupid? How many times do you call yourself fat or ugly or old or all the things? Like we have this horrible critic inside, most of us do. But then we also have cheerleaders inside of us too that are like cheering us on and trying to help us. And then we also have, you know, parts of us that we want to hide, that we don't want to come about anymore. And so this is all the information I talked about in the parts episode. So if you haven't listened to that, I highly recommend going back and listening. But through me learning about this, it's like I've been able to really use that information to talk myself back down. All right. So what do I mean by that? So the other day, while my back was killing me and I'm freaking out, like I was being really crazy in my head. Um, I, the cool thing is I was able to talk myself down by using the information that I've learned that I am actually teaching in the workshop coming up. So Saturday, March 1st, which is like this coming weekend, if you're listening to the podcast live, we are going to be learning all about parts, and I'm going to help you understand these voices in your head, help you understand how to identify them, and then how to use them to help you instead of hurt you. And it's I think, the most eye-opening, amazing thing. And I was able to use this information for myself recently with my back injury. And what I love about it is that, I sat here and told you what was going on in my head. And I kind of made it sound like a really long time. But the really cool thing is that I didn't explain to you is that all of that happened really fast. And because of the tools I have and because of the knowledge I have now about using my parts to help me instead of hurt me, within about 3 minutes after the freak out in my head, I was back to a calm place. Okay, so one of the things that you need to do in these situations, and I'm not going to give you the whole framework right now, but the number one thing that has to happen in a situation like this, let's say you get injured or you get in a fight with somebody or whatever the situation is. Okay, I'm not going to like make up a bunch of examples, but in my situation with my back, I instantly went into a negative spiral, negative Nelly, negative, scared. It was fear. It was absolute fear, right? And so the first thing that we need to do is recognize the fear, recognize the emotion, feel it, like fully feel it and let it be there. And that's what I did. I fully felt it. And then I listened. I didn't just hear the one voice. Remember, I told you all the different voices? There was some that were panicking, and then there were others that were a little bit more stable, saying, no, you don't need to cut calories. No, you're going to be fine. You need to rest. I actually took a moment to hear all of the different voices, hear all of the different information happening inside of my body. Like I really slowed down, I listened, and then what I did is the voices that were telling me you're going to gain all the weight back. Nobody's going to trust you as a trainer. Why would anybody hire you? You suck. I mean, I had a lot of negative, right? I took those negative thoughts and I looked at them a little deeper. And one of the thoughts that it's a recurring thought for me. My biggest thing is worrying that people are going to leave me, like worrying people are going to like finally see who I really am and leave. And so that's that abandonment wound that we've talked about when I talked about core wounds. I have it really bad. It's I say really bad. It's just my most like dominant core wound that just appears a lot. And so when I think about being injured, I instantly think about gaining weight. And then the next kind of thought in that process is like, why would anybody want me to be their coach? Because I can't even take care of myself, is where my brain goes to. And then I think, oh, my current clients are going to leave and I'll never get another client. So that's kind of the spiral. That's the steps of how I think. So what I do now is when I go there, I challenge those thoughts. So my first challenge would be like, okay, is it true that I'm going to instantly gain weight just by taking a week off from exercising and healing my back? No. Like, I know 100% that I cannot gain 65 pounds in a week or less. It's just not possible. I'm not. And first of all, it's just not going to happen. So I can already like say to that voice, no, that's not true. Stop it. Stop going there. It's not going to happen. Okay. The second thing is, you know, just because, since I've debunked the fact that I'm not going to gain weight. Okay. Now, am I going to have to start back slowly with my workouts? Yes. But I would rather start back. So here's my rational side of me, myself stepping forward to like take control. Myself says to those other voices, no, you're not going to gain weight. We know that's just not possible. I mean, it's possible to gain weight, but not 65 pounds. Like even if I gained a pound, like it's nobody's going to know. Nobody's going to care, right? The second one was that people would not trust me as a trainer or a coach because not taking care of myself. Well, the evidence shows that that's not true either. Over the years, I've been injured. Over the years, I've been different sizes and shapes. And I don't think anybody's ever left me that I'm aware of for that reason. Whether as a client, a friend, my husband, for goodness sake, he has been around 27 years and he's seen every shape and size and good and bad side of me all these years. And guess what? He's still here. So, I'm debunking again the next level of fear in my body. Okay, so do you see how I'm doing that? Do you see how I'm going in? I'm being super aware, super duper aware of what I'm feeling. And the difference between being super aware of what you're feeling and listening to all the parts, the difference of me doing that now versus I used to just automatically eat or automatically exercise. And so in this case, let's say, I mean, I haven't really had an injury like this bad in a while. So, um, when you're injured, you can't go exercise. But I would have, there has been other times where like I hurt my knee one time. I've had a couple injuries where I couldn't exercise. So remember I told you earlier that exercise sometimes was my avoider. I would use exercise to avoid feeling a certain way or to kind of control myself. But the other one is the cookies. So in times when I've been injured before and I was scared about gaining weight and kind of going down that same spiral I just explained, before I would have not been able to exercise and I certainly wouldn't have wanted to eat cookies. I would have just starved myself. Like, not starved, but I would have cut way back and only eaten protein and vegetables and been really, really, really strict on myself around that, around the eating. So the difference now is that instead of just immediately trying to avoid the true feeling deep inside, which ultimately is my abandonment wound, you see where I'm going with this? Like, it's a lot deeper than just having pain. So, you know, I would have used to just avoid. Now I'm feeling it all. I'm letting it flood into my head. I'm letting the feelings be there. I'm addressing the feelings maturely and calmly. And guess what? Just like I said earlier, it takes like less than 2 minutes to have all of this like emotion come in, but it takes just about 1 to 3 minutes to get it back out and to come back into a calm state and to feel back into control and clarity. And I love it. Okay. So I'm sorry if I'm all over the place because I totally went off my notes and now I'm just talking. So let me give you a couple of tips. When you are, let's bring it back to pain. Actually, before I get to the tips, let me say this. It's really important to know that physical pain and emotional distress are deeply interconnected. Okay, so I have people a lot come to me that are in chronic pain. Maybe they have low back pain all the time, or maybe their hip is really bad, or whatever the thing, their neck pain, their shoulder pain. There's a lot of people have a lot of pain, and it just is, right? Sometimes we just have pain. But what I think a lot of people don't understand is that when you have physical pain, it creates emotional pain. And then the emotional pain increases the physical pain. So it's this constant cycle of physical pain, mental pain. Physical pain gets more, emotional pain gets more. And it just keeps like spiraling. I'm going to say up, like in a negative way, right? You're getting more and more pain, more and more pain, more and more pain, more and more depression, more and more depression, more and more bad self-talk. It's all interconnected. So right now, the stats that I looked up say that depression typically affects about 8% of the general population. But among people with chronic pain, it goes up to 30 to 45% that experience depression. Okay. So the relationship between depression and pain is what we call bidirectional. Depression is a positive predictor of developing chronic pain, and chronic pain increases the risk of developing depression. So if you feel down in the dumps because you're in pain, it's very valid, okay? It's valid, but you have to be willing though to do something to break the cycle so that it doesn't get worse. Okay. And when you feel bad, it can be really hard. So let's go over just a few strategies to help you get out of the pain, depression, mental cycle. Okay. First, I already said it. You have to become aware. You have to be super aware of what is happening in your head. Okay. Even if your pain is somewhere else in your body, your head is probably creating even more pain. Okay. I promise. Okay. I'm going to tell you in a minute what I did. And then what you want to do is when you're being aware of how you're feeling in your head, you want to really listen in close, like really listen to yourself. Don't avoid what you're thinking. It doesn't feel good to notice what you're thinking, by the way. And honestly, like you're going to think some pretty bad things about yourself. But really listen in, listen for clues as to how you are actually feeling deep down. What is the pain creating? What fear, what core wound is coming up when you feel pain? Okay. And being in pain is actually one of the best ways to really dig deep and figure out what's going on inside of you. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing, here are just some things to help you. Mindfulness, meditation, and or breath work can really, really help. So when you practice mindfulness and breathing and really like feeling the pain and feeling your body and breathing into the space that is painful, you can actually start to alleviate not only your mind, but the physical pain as well. So last week when this all happened, when this went down, I immediately went to my bed. This was Friday morning. I laid flat on my back all day Friday, all night, all day Saturday with, minus getting up to like go to the bathroom and stuff and trying to stretch. I was miserable. But during this time when I was able to calm my brain, I started really focusing on breath work. Now, if you've done breath work with me before, sometimes we use breath work just to work on like spiritual, like emotional, like, feelings. But because I was in pain, I flipped it and used it to help alleviate physical pain. So here's what I did. I was laying flat on my back and I closed my eyes and I imagined this bright, big light, like coming in through the top of my head on my inhale. And I inhaled it all the way to my low back. So I imagined like this ball of like bright energy, light, kind of, I call it like healing energy. And I imagined it coming down my head, down my spine, and settling into the whole low back space. So I imagined like that energy coming in and literally filling up my lower back and like my pelvis and like my hips. And I just imagined it kind of swirling around, heating it. I don't know. That's just what I imagined. And then when I exhaled, I imagined it like flushing down the shower drain. Okay. So I would inhale it in. I would hold my breath at the bottom of the inhale. Like I would breathe it in. Actually, breathing, I was holding at the top of the breath, but I was imagining that energy swirling around my low back. And then when I exhaled out my mouth, I would imagine literally like water going down my shower drain. I pictured my shower because that's what I know. And I imagined it almost like the pain was just like, going down the drain. And I will say that with breath work, you can really calm your mind fast because you are getting oxygen and you're being calm and you're really like working through the breath. Instantly, I noticed the chatter in my head go away. And then secondly, every time I would do the release, all pain was gone. All pain was absolutely gone. And of course, it was short-lived because when I would move, I was injured. I mean, I'm not saying you're going to make with your breath make an injury go away. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that instead of using a bunch of medication, instead of like letting your brain totally take control, by using your breath, you can alleviate the pain and make yourself feel better. Okay. So I highly recommend using the breath. It's free. Everybody can do it. It's accessible to all of us. We just have to remember to do it. Okay. The other thing is when you're in pain like this, I'm trying to give you tips around like helping pain. Physical activity. Now, it depends on what's happening in your body and where the injury or where the pain is. But so many people immediately like sit down, lay down, and do nothing because they're afraid of feeling pain. But sometimes actual physical movement is the right thing to do because when we just lay around, we get more stiff, we can actually create more pain. So even though I was like really bad, like I definitely like one of the discs was bulging in my low back. So I couldn't really do much, right? But I could get a little stretch in. I could add a little bit of like mindful movement, just a little bit like carefully. But a couple days after it started to get better, I noticed that not moving was making me feel worse. So I was able to, walk around my house, stretch more. I did a couple yoga stretches very carefully, and definitely not the one that hurt me. But it started to actually alleviate the pain even more, and not just my physical pain, but my emotional, mental pain was really keeping in check the more I was able to move around. So if you're injured, remember walking is so good for you, maybe even swimming, stretching, um, anything like that, okay, can really help you. And then finally, one more thing that's kind of a different tip other than obviously telling you to move and stretch, and to breathe, because those are really important to me. But this one I found to be really helpful, and that is to write it out. Okay. Journal, be creative if you want to. But what I did is, I mean, I was laying around, I had nothing else to do. Right. I couldn't really use my computer because it was too heavy to hold above me, or to like, I couldn't bend to use it. So I was able to get a pad of paper, and I wrote out exactly what I told you. I actually created characters for each of the voices in my head, and I wrote a little story, and it kept me busy, and it actually expressed my feelings out on paper, which is what made me decide to share this with you guys today. I'm like, oh, this is a podcast episode. And I'm not reading what I wrote to you, but I gave you in the beginning a little bit of what that dialogue was, like the voices in my head that were like arguing inside almost. And so by writing out your feelings, you are acknowledging your feelings, and it gives them expression, and it gives you a little bit deeper look inside. And by doing that, you get that the calmness, you get the curiosity of what's happening in your body. And then you can start to be a little bit more compassionate. So last week's episode was all about being curious and compassionate. So we've got to do that with ourselves. And if you're in physical pain, instead of like just trying to numb it with medication, or instead of trying to, you know, just ignore it and to listen to the negative voices in your head, really work with it. And writing it out is a really good way to express it and to acknowledge how you're feeling. Okay. So when we acknowledge the relationship between physical pain and mental pain, and then we implement some of these strategies, right? Like being aware, listening to what your body's telling you, listening to your mind and all the different voices, um, doing mindful meditation or breath work, moving as much as you can, and then writing it out. These are all techniques and strategies that can help you reduce your pain. Um, when we look at all of these aspects, you can really start the process of healing. And for me, I can honestly tell you that it's been almost a full week, and I was able to slowly do my cycle class today. I didn't get to do as much as they were doing, and I went for a 30-minute walk yesterday. I'm able to stretch, I'm able to do a lot more. And I do believe, going to my chiropractor, and I've done some of the things to help my back, but I really believe that my mental outlook and this internal work has made me heal even faster. And, maybe that's not true, but I believe it is. And, what you believe is the most important thing. So I hope that you found this helpful. Sorry, I'm just kind of talking a lot about, how my brain and what was happening. But I think when we can be open and share with each other how we feel and the things that happen in our head, the more we can normalize it. And the more normalized it is, the more compassionate we can be for each other. It all comes back to this curiosity and compassion and being able to calm yourself. And that all starts on the inside. If you're living externally all the time, worrying about what people think of you, trying to find an external fix to everything. Maybe that's medication, maybe that's drugs, maybe it's alcohol, maybe it's food, maybe it is exercise, maybe it's, looking to other people to always help you fix your problems. If that's how you're living all the time, that might be harder. It may take longer to get the answer you need and to get the healing you need. So try next time, or today, even if you're not in physical pain, like try today to look internally first before you're looking for the external answers, because I truly believe when we turn inward that we already have exactly what we need and the answer inside. We just have to be willing to listen. So, you guys, thank you so much. If you are interested in the workshop, in person is in High Point, North Carolina, Saturday, March 1st from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. I booked it for 4 hours, but I don't know. It may not take that long. It might, I won't go over on purpose, but it's going to be awesome. If you are not near me and you want to learn about this information and start applying it right away, I'm also doing it online Friday, March 14th at 1 p.m. Double check that. But it's only going to be 3 hours because because we're not in person, I'm going to be able to like move it along a little bit faster. But I really believe that if you experience chronic pain, if you are, experiencing any of these abandonment, guilt, shame, any of the core wounds that we all have, or if you are just not feeling fulfilled in your life in some way, I really believe more than ever that this is the answer. This is the jumping point into figuring out how to truly live your best, happiest, most fulfilled life. And every single person listening to this right now, every single person in the universe deserves to feel their happiest, healthiest, most fulfilled life. So, you guys, thanks again for being here, and I will catch you next week. Take care.